Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons is highly regarded for being a fine piece of art, and I have thoughts about that. Not about whether it's art or not, because the discussion on whether video games are art is silly and a discussion for another video. The praise for Brothers' artistry seems to focus on its story and innovative gameplay. The game even won Best Xbox Game of 2013, defeating BioShock Infinite, Tomb Raider, and GTA 5, somehow. And my suspicion is that this is because of its heavy themes on loss and how it leaves you feeling sad. Now, I'm not saying the story is bad, I actually like it. But I have my own subjective thoughts on its quality and why, although I do agree it is a fine piece of art, it could actually be finer. And ultimately, I aggressively disagree with the cultural notion in the liberal arts that good art equals sad. If you haven't played Brothers, I recommend doing so and forming your own opinion first before watching this, particularly if you don't enjoy spoilers. But I don't think it's absolutely necessary to play the game blind in order to enjoy it. Just know I will be spoiling basically all of it. Okay, let's establish that the story here is good in my opinion, particularly for having no dialogue. It's simple, with only a few impactful beats, yet for me it creates a strong emotional connection to the characters. You experience the story through two brothers, Naia and Naia, yes, I know, who in the wake of losing their mother go on a quest to find a magical tree that has a magical substance that will heal their dying father. You receive the story through the brothers' interactions and through the environment. But even then, the storytelling doesn't give you concrete cause and effect events. Rather, it evokes themes of a world broken by war, pride, fear, power, regret, and manipulation. You don't get to understand what's going on in the world because these two young boys don't get to. You are in their perspective, traversing a world with events and politics and conflicts beyond their comprehension. They can only manipulate the remains of things too big to understand. Throughout this entire journey, you play as both brothers at the same time. One hand controlling one, the other, solving puzzles and giving baddies the runaround, which had an interesting impact on me. Because in my mind, they together were the main character together. Although the game told me in the beginning, I didn't realize the little brother Naia was the protagonist until his older brother died. This hit me in a way a video game hasn't before. You get so used to being two brothers, thinking of them as a pair that will never part because that's how you perceive your own hands. So after hours of being both of them, controlling different movements with each hand, at least the best you can, it's so jarring to all of a sudden stop using one hand. Taking it off the keyboard meant one vital life lost. And I think the developers intend for you to feel this, because it's a mechanical way of representing how Naia feels. Especially because, up to this point, he's the one who doubts himself. And if you want to make an impact with your narrative, one way to do that is to choose the weakest person in a given situation to be the protagonist, and make them have to go through it alone. The beauty of this narrative culminates right here as you're controlling only Naia at his weakest moment. He was already feeling weak after losing his mother and worrying for his father's poor health. Now he doesn't even have his brother to strengthen him, and it's up to him to find that strength again. He has a moment with his brother and his mother from beyond the grave, which I interpret to mean still feeling connected to those you lost and relying on their strength still. Naia might doubt himself, but he believes that others believe in him, and lets their faith carry him. That's so relatable. When we lose faith, hope, confidence in ourselves, we rely on those who still have faith in us, who have the strength we wish we had. A beautiful theme, a lot to draw from it. But man, I wish the story earned this moment better for me. Here's the deal moving forward. Everything I'm about to say comes from my particular preferences when it comes to storytelling. This is subjective, and frankly, I'm also going to acknowledge the argument as to why I'm wrong. However, we should analyze art because that continues the conversation of what the human experience really is. We learn about others and ourselves when we examine what their art is telling us, what we're hearing, and what we wish the art said in a different way. Here's my different way. So, the game kills Naia suddenly, and by suddenly I mean the brothers are facing danger at almost every step of their journey, but it isn't until near the end of the journey that he dies. Most of the game reinforces these two brothers are working better and better together, being in this journey together. So it hits that much harder when that is taken away. From a narrative sense, it's fitting for Naia to die right here at this moment of greatest hope, when acquiring the water of life that will heal his father, because now Naia feels so much inner turmoil and despair. What's the point of hope, of trying, if you can't save those you love? If, to quote Chester, in the end it doesn't even matter. My issue with Naia's death is the minimal cause and effect. To recap what happens, after helping a girl escape from an invisible giant, She leads the boys into a creepy tunnel where signs point to a spider living there. Turns out the girl is the spider, and she's lured in her next prey. She puts Naia into a ball of web, then tries to eat Naia, but Naia is good at bowling, and Naia doesn't mind a little mutilation. However, as he's pulling out the last leg, Spider-Woman stabs Naia with one of her front legs and leaves him mortally wounded. Why she couldn't do that earlier, like when Naia was pulling out any of her other legs, is left unanswered, but I'll ignore that for now. Naia and Naia still make it to the Water of Life, and instead of rushing to get water to heal Naia needs convincing first. But it's a long trek anyway, and I doubt Naia shaving a few seconds off of his speed run would have done anything. Naia is dead. Naia is alone. To me, Naia's death comes off as contrived, and not in the liberally defined sense of everything in a story is contrived, but in the sense of you can see the strings the author is pulling. I'm less immersed because things just seem to happen out of convenience for the narrative's sake. My preference is that instead of Naia dying because it's the right time for it to happen in the story, I wish the characters had done something to put themselves on this path of impending doom, so that Naia's death would feel to me like the result of the narrative journey, not simply the predestined narrative goal. The logic of Naia dying just because means he could have died at any point in the story without that logic breaking. What I want to know is, why did it have to be after encountering Spider-Woman when they reached the Water of Life? Why not when they were hiding from the invisible giant, or escaping the cult, or escaping the trolls, or helping the friendly troll, or running from the dog, or even slipping on the wrong rock and tumbling off the cliff before being able to start the journey at all? Now granted, there is a moment right before the brothers descend down the tunnel with Spider-Girl when Naia tries to pull Naia away from her. I think this moment is trying to raise suspicion in the player, and it did succeed in doing so for me. One way to get your audience thinking about something is to have a character think about it. However, I don't think raising suspicion in the player is actually adding to the overall experience of the narrative, especially so because this is the only moment it happens. Naia doesn't say anything earlier when Naia is simping, and maybe it's because they were focusing on the scarier situation at hand, but in any case, I think it'd be far more interesting to focus on just how badly Naia wants to be with this random girl he just met. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So here's my proposed fix, and I hate wording it that way. I'm not better than the developers, I'm just catering to myself here, and like I said, there's a really good counter-argument I'll address. But first, let me say what I would have preferred after giving this a think. We go back to the beginning. After bringing their dad to the doctor, Dad has a moment where he's lucid enough, probably due to the pain from the rough trip, to speak to his sons. This conversation will establish both character arcs. To Naia, he says to protect his little brother and always stick with him. Naia's lesson is selflessness. To Naia, he says to find his own strength because he can't lean on others forever. Naia's lesson is self-efficacy. We finish the scene with a last moment of tenderness between father and sons before the brothers embark. Now that we're in Act 2, we have a moment where Naia ogles a girl and Naia is annoyed in the classic little brother way, shaking his head, scrunching his face, looking away, something like that. Naia tries to pull Naia back to keep him focused, but Naia shoves him aside so he can try to flirt. This characterizes both playable characters, gives us a funny moment, and it even establishes what Dad might have meant by stick with your little brother. Even better, this hints at how the brothers are dealing with the trauma of losing one parent and being so close to losing another. Naia wants to distract himself with a relationship. Naia clings tightly to those he still has. Neither of them want to feel even more alone. We can easily fit this moment in the beginning sequence right after the brothers make it out of the main village where that massive pile of horse crap of a bully lives. Instead of simply helping each other get past the angry dog, they could help a girl who's trapped on a bale of hay. After rescuing her, Naia tries to capitalize on the situation by playing the "it was nothing" card and hopes she sees him as her friendly neighborhood rescuer. But Naia's insistence keeps him focused and he asks the girl for directions and says he'll come back for her. But, and this is key, she doesn't take to his advances. Even funnier, she could be dating the bully that the brothers previously dealt with, and even if it isn't stated, the player will connect that the girl will likely not think too highly of the brothers after humiliating her SO. From here, the story continues as it already is, but we sprinkle in moments where Naia becomes more happy to stick with Naia. The impression we leave in the player's mind is that Naia actually does want to allow this grief to bring him closer to his younger brother, and learn that it's better to grieve together, as Naia wants. We need to build up hope before we burn it to the ground. Of course, we need to remind the player that Naia also struggles to do things on his own and relies on his older brother so that the all is lost beat still hits hard. Then the brothers meet the Spider-Woman. As they help her, the player sees how the brothers interact with her. Naia is immediately flirty, but this time she actually takes to his advances. Just like that, there's a girl who actually likes when he hits on her. Naia is fallen. The contentment he felt earlier toward his brother isn't relevant anymore because he's now so close to getting what he wants. Meanwhile, Naia is skeptical of the whole thing. He doesn't like the way she looks at Naia. She's obviously thirsty for more than a kiss, maybe blood? He wants to stay with his brother and keep focus on the task at hand, not understanding that Naia isn't ignoring what is so vital, he's trying to avoid his internal pain. So when Naia wants to go with the girl into the tunnel and Naia tries to pull him away, we have added context for the real strain in this moment. If the story wanted to go bolder, Naia could push Naia away and tell him to go to the tree himself since it's close enough, and even the girl can chime in and say the path is safe. But then we have a brief moment where Naia sees on his brother's face how hurt and worried he feels, so he quickly promises to join him on the way back. Naia's perspective should make sense to the player, even if they might not agree with it. Naia already got his wish of being with his brother, now Naia wants to be alone with someone else. He wants to be wanted, even seen as strong by someone who could be a romantic partner. So Naia is sent away and he feels betrayed. To make this moment even better, there should be an alternate path leading to the tree that the brothers could have walked all along, and that Naia starts to follow now, shoulders hung, clutching himself in the cold, showing that everything that's about to happen isn't only caused by the brothers navigating a large, cruel world, but also by their choices to go where they ought not, which they did to distract themselves from their grief. We have a cutscene in which down the path Naia finds another river he's too scared to swim, and beyond that are the massive tree roots and trunk he has to scale. It's also daunting, and Naia still doubts himself. He debates whether he should try to go on his own. After wiping away a tear or two, he clenches his fists, decides to go back, and trek down the tunnel after his brother. He's not sure his plan, but he can't go about this alone. He doesn't trust his own strength, and even if his brother is willing to abandon him, he's not willing to do the same in return. Watching Naia alone in this cutscene should feel wrong to the player, but I think it's important to keep it all as a cutscene, because the first time you play as only Naia should be after losing Naia. Naia walks in on Naia trying to kiss the girl, but because his eyes are closed, he doesn't see that she's morphing into the whack spider girl demon beast thing. Naia pushes him out of the way. Naia is initially mad until he sees the girl finishing her transformation. She goes after Naia and puts him into the ball of web while shoving Naia to the side. In her anger, she decides to eat Naia while making Naia watch. Naia fully realizes that in the worst way, he has failed his promise to his dad to always stay by his brother's side. Now the fight happens, but a little different so that the stabbing doesn't come off as random. While trying to eat Naia, Naia breaks free and begins the sequence of rolling to the spider girl to knock her over. The only thing we change is at the end. When she has her two last legs remaining, the web ball trapping Naia is finally worn down. Naia goes to grab one of the legs, but then the girl swipes at him with the other. He dodges. The brothers share a look, then they both go for the front legs and pull. Naia is able to get his out as easily as the others, but that leaves Naia alone struggling to pull hard enough. The spider goes for him with the only remaining strength she has. Naia gets there in time to push Naia out of the way and pull the leg out, but in the tussle, the spider stabs him. She bleeds out, leaving Naia mortally wounded. And then he dies, and Naia finds the connection to the strength he needs to return home. In the end, instead of leaving the father and Naia sad together, Naia can show his father his newfound strength, and that he carries his brother and his mother with him. Now his father can see that it's okay to be weak at times. However, this is where I look at this rewrite, this headcanon, I guess, and wonder if I'm missing something. Granted, I think the world of liberal arts is missing something. Why do we in the arts often praise sad art over other art? I figure it's because the nature of art is to examine the human experience, and when something sheds light on very difficult tragedies that we either intentionally or ignorantly ignore, then we often give that art awards and recognition. That art challenges us to think in a new way. But Brothers wasn't simply praised for its artistic take on grief, survivor's guilt, and working together. It won a BAFTA for game innovation and achieved Best Xbox Game of the Year. Sure, the gameplay is a cool idea, and maybe this was just the first time seeing it, so I really shouldn't be critical about how I think the idea can be expanded upon, but if part of the decision to praise it so highly is because of its story, well, the emotion could be stronger and more earned. Maybe my rewrite accomplishes that. Maybe it doesn't. That's for you to decide. In my opinion, Ending with Naia and his dad being sad is indeed sad, but not the fulfilling kind of sad where I'm left pondering the themes of the sad art, more the kind of sad that makes me think, oh, that's sad. There's nothing wrong with this kind of simplicity, but why not have both kinds of sad? What does the sadness mean? What needs to change in order to rectify what led to such sadness? But that's not my real point. I don't think purely making a thing sad automatically makes the thing more artistic and praiseworthy. If we want to examine the human condition, then shouldn't we examine all of it? Instead of only giving awards to sadness and anger, what about joy and hope? Triumph, by definition, follows some kind of tragedy, so shouldn't we praise both? I love the art that also talks about the good things outside our control that bless our lives. It's not all about the unknown boot ready to fall, but serendipitous joy. Examining the human condition shouldn't be so biased toward our efforts being ruled out by Murphy's Law, or our positive efforts giving way to our hubris, or any of the failings of an imperfect species, because that's not the entire human experience. I'm not saying sad art equals bad art, only that sadness is not the only way to represent the entire human experience. It also isn't that I want stories that are happy all the time, because happiness also doesn't represent the entire human experience. Mass market media focuses on the good guys winning because those moments of true triumph in our lives, whether by some grand accomplishment or breaking a threshold and overcoming a personal challenge, or simply getting to enjoy your favorite weather for a few minutes, are also very real and very relatable. Happiness is as real as sorrow, excitement as anger, enthusiasm as terror. So, what am I still missing? Where does my argument fall short? Well, what if the point of the brother's story isn't to examine the nuance of sadness or grief? What if it isn't trying to mean anything? What if Brothers is simply observing what is? Perhaps it's not commenting on any particular grief-ridden experience that many in the world might relate to. It's simply portraying the uncontrollable world that leads to these moments of grief. It's simply saying that tragedy happens, and when they do, it hurts. It reminds me of the type of descriptive poetry whose goal is not to express meaning, but merely observe something beautiful in nature. I remember looking at this in college, and I wish for the life of me I could remember the example that caught my attention so much, but I remember not enjoying the idea at first. Why not add more depth to your poetry, instead of merely stating what is, even if in a beautiful way? But sometimes when the other foot falls, it doesn't help to find meaning. Sometimes it does, but not always. Sometimes we simply need to acknowledge it, validate it, allow the emotions that follow. Maybe the developers aren't trying to express a specific message to be deciphered through analysis. Rather, they might be allowing the audience to find their own meaning by relating to the art in their own way. Or maybe, just maybe, they want the audience to get to the end and think, oh, that's sad. I'm not convinced this is what the developers are doing, but it does seem plausible. I don't know, my brain bounces back and forth between ideas. The two brothers go through so many parts of a world that lives and dies without them. There's so much beyond their comprehension and control. We don't get a say in what happens. Unfortunately, that means we and our loved ones will make poor decisions, forget things, make mistakes, and even die. Wars, natural disasters, crime, disease, all will happen whether we want it to or not. So will art, laughter, and love, yet we don't have much of a say in what happens to us, despite how much we try to convince ourselves otherwise. What we do have a say in is so small compared to the vast, daunting depths of human experience. You will at times feel grief, and other times triumph, such as life. However, Brothers doesn't end with how you will also feel joy. That isn't its focus. I can't help but wonder if this story was fueled by the losses the developers had experienced and the pressing need to express what it's like. And that is felt so clearly once Naia dies, and you don't get to control him anymore. You lose half of yourself. Even though Naia still comes to find strength in his connection to his brother, the point isn't growth after tragedies. Not yet, anyway. For now, it is simply grief. There are so many stories about triumph. There are yet many about tragedy, and this narrative in particular knew what it needed to convey. The bottom dollar certainty that tragedy happens. Wrapped in moments of hope, whimsy, irritating brotherly love, fear, bravery, self-doubt, even triumph. The heart of this tale beats the raw, unfiltered rhythm of anguish. Brother sheds light on how we are lost in a world that lives so far beyond us, that doesn't revolve around us. It's a story of what you strive to go through together, and what you have to go through alone. Each normal day is a blessing. Every tragedy is understandable. Some days, that knowledge simply hurts. Okay, yeah, I know my Firewatch video essay was about grief, and this one is about sadness and grief and art. I promise my future videos won't all be depressing. These were just the 2 essays that were the most ready to create, so don't worry, I'm doing okay. And I hope you are too.